Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. 60 years ago, a family farm in Ferrisburg became a museum. Today, the home and grounds are a National Historic Landmark known as Rokeby. The Rokeby Museum is dedicated to preserving the story of the Underground Railroad and exploring modern-day issues of race relations and social justice. To learn more and see the grounds and exhibits at Rokeby, I am joined by the museum's director, Lindsay Varner. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So for those people that might not be familiar, tell us about the Rokeby Museum.
Yeah, so Rokeby Museum tells the story of 4 generations of the Robinson family. They lived on the site from 1793 until 1961 when Elizabeth Donnelly Robinson passed away, and the site was turned over to a memorial association to remember the legacy of the family and their work as abolitionists, agriculturalists, and artists.
Well, it's the Robinson family, but the homestead is called Rokeby. What's the story behind that?
Yeah, we're not entirely sure how Rokeby became Rokeby. We've seen that the place has been called many things: Locust Grove, the Robinson Homestead. But our kind of guess is the 3rd generation Robinson, Roland Evans Robinson, had a bit of a sense of humor. And in the 19th century, Sir Walter Scott's poem Rokeby was incredibly popular across the United Kingdom and the United States. And the Rokeby in the United Kingdom, there's a place in County Durham called Rokeby, is this grand Palladian home. And we think it might have been Robinson's way of kind of joking that this small Vermont farmhouse that's owned by Robinsons, but then the Robinsons also, a family of Robinsons, owned this grand Palladian home in England, that it was just this joke amongst the family that kind of caught on, and people kept calling it Rokeby. There are Rokebys all across the United States, but most of them are a little bit grander than our Rokeby, but it stuck, and we decided to keep it and name the museum that.
Well, it's such a wonderful museum, and there, what you said, 4 generations of Robinsons lived and worked there, and many different people of the Robinsons did different things through those generations. Here's a picture of the original lands there.
Yeah, this is a sketch that was done by Roland Evans Robinson. He's 3rd generation, and he was a illustrator early on in his life, doing things for what's now Field and Stream. It was Forest and Stream at the time. And he would do these gorgeous sketches, oftentimes basing off of things that he was seeing around the lands at Rokeby.
Beautiful. And were they all also abolitionists? I mean, that's what the museum is most known for, is the Underground Railroad. So talk a little bit about that history.
Yeah, that's where our National Historic Landmark status comes from, is the work on the Underground Railroad at Rokeby. That is the 2nd generation Robinsons, Roland and Rachel Robinson. They weren't all abolitionists. The 1st generation were Quakers, the 2nd generation were Quakers, but it's really that 2nd generation that were abolitionists. They were leaders in the anti-slavery movement, both in Vermont, but then also across New England. And they actively utilized the site to help freedom seekers establish themselves and find freedom, both in the United States and then potentially also into Canada. And they were writing for major newspapers like the Liberator. They were working with the Vermont Anti-Slavery Society and anti-slavery societies locally. So they were very heavily involved in the abolitionist movement in the 19th century.
Right. And there are a number of buildings on the grounds in Ferrisburg. So tell us about the main house first, which is under preservation this year, I believe.
Yes, that's correct. So this is the historic Robinson home, and it is built in 3 stages. Behind this main portion of the building, when you're welcome to the museum, this is the beautiful view that you get when you drive up to the museum. And the house was originally sometime in the 1780s. There's a small Vermont farmhouse on the back, and then it was added on to in 1814, and where you see the roof line kind of change, that was a later 19th century addition that was put on. So there's this incredible history just with the building itself and the family members who had helped to establish it. And then across the site as a whole, we have a number of the farm outbuildings, varying in dates across the 19th and early 20th century. And so it allows us to really help to tell the story both of the Underground Railroad and some of the freedom seekers who came and worked on the farm with the Robinsons, and then also the agricultural history of the site. The Robinsons are also known for being one of the first families to import merino sheep into Vermont. And so we can tell this full agricultural story from the early 19th century all the way to the mid 20th century.
Right, it's wonderful that you have so many buildings, and the buildings have things in them that speak to this story. And then, of course, there's a beautiful education center that really kind of takes a deep dive into some of the freedom seekers and many other things. So tell us about the visitor center.
Yeah, so our Modern Education Center was opened in 2013. And upstairs, we house a permanent exhibit called Free and Safe, the Underground Railroad in Vermont. And this exhibit tells the story of two freedom seekers that we know came to Rokeby and their stories, so Simon and Jesse. And one of the things that makes Rokeby and the story of the Robinsons incredibly important and very special to our national history, the Robinsons we have about 15,000 letters as part of our collection. They're housed at Middlebury College. And we're able to trace many of these stories, which is a rare thing to be able to trace the story of individuals on the Underground Railroad. And we can trace how their time at Rokeby as well as how they got to Rokeby. So the exhibit really explores that, the history of the Underground Railroad, as well as the stories of Simon and Jesse.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and the Education Center is also where we can introduce people to some of the other members of the Robinson family as well.
Right, and we'll get to that in a minute. That the Education Center you were showing about Simon, that can also be, you can see it online, which is awesome. That there's a little bit of it. It's not the same experience as, of course, coming to the museum, but there is some online, which is terrific. And so tell us about some of those seasonal exhibits. You have one now from another Robinson family member.
Yes, our downstairs gallery is our rotating exhibit space, and we use that as an opportunity to introduce people to other major themes that we have at the museum, whether it be other members of the Robinson family or it's themes that are a part of our mission. In the past, we've had artists come in and do contemporary art that is often inspired by the history at Rokeby. We have seasonal exhibits that explore other members of the family, such as Rachel Robinson Elmer, who is fourth generation and was a commercial artist, and in particular did a lot of children's illustrations in the early 20th century. We've explored agriculture and the works of Rowland Evans Robinson. So it's just another way that we can introduce to people the full history that we have at Rokeby and the incredible pieces that we have inside our collection.
Yeah, and they're beautiful, and of course so connected to nature. So those drawings of nature are just beautiful. And what does the future hold for Rokeby? Of course, I just must say you also have 4-season trails that are just stunning that people can walk on as well, and tours that people can go on. But what do you see as the future? Let's make sure that we put that in there here today.
Yeah, we see Rokeby as an educational site. It is a place for people to come and learn. And it is just a wonderful opportunity for both tourists to come and learn about the Underground Railroad in Vermont, as well as the national story. But we are also really keen to grow our education program and bring school students in so that they can have a better understanding of our history, both nationally as well as locally and within the state. And we are working to just continually ramp up, bringing in students, coming up with innovative programming that's engaging and gets people really thinking and talking and wanting to discuss often very difficult parts of our history. And we think that that is an important role that we can be playing within our community.
Absolutely. And I assume that, as most museums do, you need a few volunteers. What is your need, and what kinds of opportunities are there for volunteers?
Yeah, we are always looking for volunteers. We have volunteers who run all of our tours. We do tours on the site Fridays through Mondays, and every one of those tours is run by volunteers. We are working on a lot of our collections and starting to get it cataloged into a catalog system. So we look for volunteers to help us go through collections. And we also have volunteers that help doing everything from grounds work to helping to open and close the center during the season. You had mentioned the trails. We have 90 acres as a whole on the site. About 50 acres of those are trails, and that does take an awful lot of volunteer work to keep those trails in good maintenance. And we love people coming out to use them. So the more volunteers we have out, the more people we can welcome to the site. So there's always opportunities, and you can go to our website to sign up.
So your website then is www.rokeby.org, right?
Yes.
Pretty straightforward, ROKEBY. And your phone number for people that want to use that, it's 802-877-3406. And just to wrap it up, Lindsay, again, so the themes of the Rokeby Museum, what again is this museum all about before we part today?
So it's abolition, art, and agriculture, and we've added on to that recently advocacy.
Advocacy, that's fantastic. Very important issues for today. Lindsay Varner, thank you so much for taking the reins of this wonderful little gem of a museum during the pandemic. And we welcome you to Vermont. It's wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.